Put your doubts to the side, get his ass in the bed. Even if it's whack, you can still get some head. Go for it, go for it, go. Ho for it, ho for it, ho. Do you want that dick or no? You better go for it, ho.
This is the story of Jashari Jackson. On July 27, 2025 at 2:30 a.m., Tulsa police responded to report a gunfire at an after-hours club located at 2700 North Yale Avenue. When officers arrived, they located two victims. 23-year-old Jashari Jackson had been struck by gunfire and was pronounced dead at the scene. According to investigators, the incident began with a physical altercation involving several individuals outside the club. Witnesses reported that during the fight, one participant retrieved a firearm from a vehicle. Shots were fired into the air and then toward the crowd. Jackson was caught in the line of fire. Police identified the shooter as 18-year-old Jaida McGrew. He was taken into custody shortly after the incident and charged with first-degree murder and assault with a deadly weapon. Detectives continued to investigate and determined that a second individual, 19-year-old Jeradiah Hernandez, assisted McGrew by driving him to and from the location and by being involved in handling the firearm. Hernandez was arrested in early August 2025 and charged with accessory to first-degree murder. Investigators collected ballistic evidence from the scene, conducted multiple witness interviews, and reviewed available surveillance. Authorities described the incident as originating from a dispute involving personal relationships that escalated to violence. The case moved into the court system with both suspects facing serious felony charges. McGrew awaited trial for murder and assault, while Hernandez faced prosecution as an accessory. If you're captivated by real crime stories that peel back the layers of truth, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us as we uncover real cases, raise awareness, and give a voice to the voiceless. Before we dive into today's story, we want to hear from you. Where are you tuning in from? And how do you feel as the story unfolds? Welcome to Deadly Crime Unmasked, the show where we expose the shocking crimes that rip through communities and the chilling secrets lurking behind closed doors. These are real people, real events, real consequences. Don't forget to subscribe and activate notifications. You won't want to miss the gripping story that's coming up. Now, let's dive in. Jashari Jackson was born on August 29, 2001, in Tulsa, Oklahoma. She was 23 years old at the time of her death in July 2025. Her early years were shaped within Tulsa's educational system. She attended Emerson Elementary School, where she began her formal education, and later progressed to Carver Middle School. Following middle school, she enrolled at Rogers High School, where she completed her studies and graduated in the year 2019. During her upbringing, Jashari was described as active within her community and participated in routine childhood and teenage activities associated with school and family life. A significant part of her background was her faith. She was baptized at an early age and became an active member of the Maplewood Missionary Baptist Church, where she was known for her consistent attendance and participation. After completing high school, Jashari pursued higher education. At the time of her death, she was enrolled at Millermont College, where she studied medical coding. This field reflected her focus on preparing for a professional career. Her family life was central to her daily activities. She was a mother of a young son, and much of her routine included balancing her studies with parenting responsibilities. She lived in close connection with her mother and extended family, maintaining strong family ties in Tulsa. Jashari's daily routine was typical of a young adult managing academic obligations, family life, and social interactions. She was part of a network of friends and acquaintances in Tulsa, often seen in community settings and social gatherings. Her social circles connected her to both family-oriented environments and the broader community of peers her age. On the weekend of July 26 to 27, 2025, Jashari was present at an after-hours club located at 2700 North Yale Avenue in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The venue was not an officially licensed nightclub, but an unregulated after-hours spot where individuals gathered late at night. These types of locations often operated without the same oversight or security measures as licensed entertainment venues. That night, the crowd at the location was reported to consist of dozens of people. The gathering included a mix of friends, acquaintances, and others who had arrived as part of the late-night crowd. Tensions began to rise as altercations broke out among those present. Reports later confirmed that the origin of the disturbance was a lover's quarrel involving multiple women. According to police accounts and witness statements, the conflict included current girlfriends, ex-girlfriends, and other individuals who attempted to intervene in the disputes. As the arguments escalated, multiple fights broke out both inside and outside the club. The disputes were not isolated to one pair of individuals, but spread among groups, leading to chaos and crowd. Witnesses later suggested that Jashari was drawn into the conflict either by attempting to de-escalate the situation or by being unintentionally caught in the middle of the altercations. Her exact involvement in the quarrel remains unclear, but consistent reports identify her as not being the original instigator of the dispute. The critical moment occurred around 2:30 a.m. on July 27, 2025. By this time, the fights outside the after-hours club had escalated significantly. During the escalation, 18-year-old Jaida McGrew became directly involved. Witness accounts and later police reports state that McGrew retrieved a firearm from a vehicle outside the club. Once in possession of the firearm, McGrew fired shots. According to multiple reports, the initial rounds were discharged into the air, but further shots were directed into the crowd. The situation transitioned from a physical fight into a deadly gunfire event. 2 individuals were struck by the gunfire. Jashari Jackson was hit by the bullets and sustained fatal injuries. She was declared deceased as a result of the shooting. A 26-year-old male victim was also struck by gunfire. He survived his injuries and was transported to a nearby hospital for emergency treatment. The shooting caused immediate panic among the dozens of witnesses and participants at the after-hours club. People began fleeing the area, creating confusion and disorder as police were called to the scene. Emergency services responded quickly. Tulsa police officers arrived to secure the area and begin an initial investigation. At the same time, emergency medical services, EMS, personnel provided aid to the injured victims. Jackson's death was confirmed at the scene, while the second victim was stabilized for a hospital transport. The site was secured as a crime scene for evidence collection, marking the beginning of the homicide investigation into the death of Jashari Jackson. Patrol officers from the Tulsa Police Department, TPD, were dispatched after reports of gunfire outside an after-hours club. Units arrived within minutes. The first priority was scene safety. Officers conducted a rapid threat assessment, cleared immediate hazards, and established a primary and secondary perimeter using patrol vehicles and barrier tape to control entry and exit points. A scene log was started to document all personnel entering the contained area. Medical triage ran concurrently. Officers located 2 people reported as gunshot victims. One individual, later confirmed as Jashari Jackson, showed no signs of life. Officers secured the immediate space around her body, refrained from moving physical items, and shielded potential evidence from foot traffic. The second victim, a 26-year-old male, was stabilized by first responders and transferred to EMS for transport to a local hospital. Officers gathered basic identifying information on the second victim to facilitate follow-up contact and medical record requests. Supervisors arrived in designated roles: scene commander, witness control, evidence protection, and traffic control. A dedicated officer was assigned to crowd management. Individuals present at the location were instructed to remain on site until initial screening. Separate staging areas were set up to keep potential witnesses away from each other, to reduce cross-contamination of accounts. Body-worn cameras were activated in accordance with policy to record officer actions and early statements voluntarily provided at the scene. Evidence technicians from TPD's forensic unit were requested. While waiting, patrol officers performed basic preservation, covering visible shell casings with evidence markers and improvised shields to prevent displacement, identifying fresh tire impressions, and noting the locations of vehicles that might be associated with the incident. Officers also identified nearby private cameras, building-mounted systems, doorbell cameras, and any vehicles with dash cameras, and requested owners not to overwrite their footage. A list of cameras and contact information was appended to the scene log. Once the forensic unit arrived, a systematic grid search began. Technicians photographed the scene from wide, medium, and close perspectives before collecting items. Shell casings were mapped, measured, and assigned unique identifiers. Each casing was placed in separate envelopes to preserve potential trace evidence. Any bullet strikes on surrounding structures or vehicles were documented. Vehicles thought to be connected participants were visually examined in place for damage, blood, or visible contraband. Where probable cause existed or consent was provided, vehicles were secured for warrant applications and later forensic processing. Officers canvassed for surveillance footage. If the venue maintained indoor or outdoor cameras, technicians initiated a lawful acquisition process, either via consent from proprietor or through expedited warrant request. Officers also noted streetlight cameras or municipal systems in the area and transmitted preservation requests. Simultaneously, a digital evidence request was initiated to collect relevant body-worn camera clips from all officers on scene. Identification of the deceased followed standard procedure. A medical examiner investigator responded. Preliminary identification was made through government-issued identification and confirmation from individuals who knew the victim at the scene. However, official identification rested with the medical examiner's office. The deceased was confirmed as Jashari Jackson. Next of kin notification was coordinated through TPD and the medical examiner in accordance with policy. Commanders coordinated with the Public Information Office, PIO. After verifying basic facts, time of call, number of victims, and condition updates, the PIO issued an initial public statement. One deceased adult female and one adult male transported with injuries. The statement advised that detectives had been assigned and that further details would be released when confirmed. No speculation regarding motive was included. The message requested that anyone with video or information contact the TPD tip line, and it warned the public to avoid the area due to ongoing forensic processing. By the end of the initial response phase, the scene was stabilized. The injured victim was in medical care. Preliminary witness identifications were recorded, key physical evidence was marked for collection, and a documented chain of custody had begun. The case transitioned from patrol control to the homicide unit for full investigation. Lead investigators from the TPD homicide unit assumed responsibility for the case. A case file was opened with an incident number, and a work plan was drafted. Evidence testing schedule, witness interview order, digital evidence collection, and warrant needs. Investigators divided tasks. One team focused on physical evidence and ballistics, another on witness development and timeline reconstruction, a third on digital media and open source intelligence, OSINT. All shell casings and bullets recovered at the scene were submitted to the forensic laboratory. Technicians documented caliber, manufacturer marks, and condition. Casings were entered into the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network, NIBIN, for potential correlations to other shootings. If bullet fragments were recovered from structures or vehicles, they were compared for rifling characteristics to determine whether a single firearm or multiple firearms were discharged. If a firearm was recovered, either located at the scene, surrendered, or seized during later operations, it was test-fired. Laboratory personnel compared test-fire casings and bullets to evidence recovered from the scene using comparison microscopy. If the firearm was not initially recovered, investigators pursued avenues to locate it. Search warrants for residences and vehicles associated with key persons, interviews targeting the weapon's disposition, and reviews of pawn or stolen firearm databases. Firearms trace requests were sent to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, ATF, to determine the weapon's origin and chain of commerce if a serial number was available and legible. Technicians collected potential trace evidence from vehicles and clothing seized pursuant to warrant or consent, including gunshot residue, GSR, kits, DNA swabs from high-touch areas, and latent print processing. Items were packaged, sealed, and documented to maintain the chain of custody. Detectives conducted structured, recorded interviews. Interviews began with the most cooperative eyewitnesses and those who initiated the 911 calls. A consistent theme emerged describing a confrontation characterized as a lover's quarrel, with multiple parties including current and former relationship partners and third-party interveners. Witnesses described a physical altercation escalating from verbal conflict to pushing and striking. Multiple independent witnesses identified Jaida McGrew as the individual who retrieved a firearm from a vehicle and discharged rounds. Investigators assessed witness reliability using standard criteria: vantage point, lighting, distance, prior familiarity with the parties, and consistency across separate interviews. Where discrepancies existed, detectives reconciled them by cross-referencing physical evidence, exact location of casings, trajectory analysis, and bullet impacts, with reported positions of participants at the moment of discharge. Detectives also interviewed the injured male after medical stabilization, focusing on his location relative to gunfire, his relationship to participants, and whether he observed the shooter's actions before or after shots were fired. Any statements conflicting with physical evidence were noted for later clarification. Investigators built a minute-by-minute chronology from arrival at the venue to the first 911 call to conclusion of the shooting. Sources included dispatch logs, computer-aided dispatch, CAD, timestamps, body-worn camera metadata, surveillance video timecodes, and cellular phone records where consent or warrants permitted access. The timeline aimed to establish when the initial argument began, who arrived or left location at critical moments, and the exact interval between the first visible firearm retrieval and the first gunshot. Trajectory analysis was performed where bullet strikes were identifiable. Using measured heights and angles of impacts on nearby structures and vehicles, detectives assessed firing positions and directions. This helped evaluate claims that shots were fired into the air versus toward the crowd. The spatial relationship between shell casing locations and bullet strikes was used to infer the shooter's movement during discharge. A digital evidence team canvassed open-source platforms for contemporaneous posts, live streams, or videos. Individuals who had recorded the altercation were contacted to preserve original files with intact metadata. Subpoenas or warrants were prepared where necessary to obtain unedited footage. Investigators sought private messages that arranged a gathering or documented escalating disputes prior to the incident. Venue surveillance was exported in native format. When available, investigators synchronized video from multiple angles, layered with dispatch timestamps, to verify witness accounts. If geofence digital data was lawfully obtainable, it was used to corroborate the presence of key individuals at the scene during the relevant time frame. As the evidence picture solidified, ballistic patterns, consistent witness identifications, and timeline, detectives prepared probable cause affidavits. Jaida McGrew was identified as a primary suspect based on multiple corroborating accounts and physical evidence alignment. Investigators documented that the firearm was retrieved from a vehicle during the altercation and then discharged, forming the basis for a first-degree murder charge associated with the death of Jashari Jackson and an additional charge related to the injured victim. Detectives also developed information indicating that a second person facilitated the suspect's transportation to and from the scene and may have assisted with the firearm's movement after shooting. On that basis, investigators pursued an accessory to first-degree murder charge for the identified associate, supported by phone records, witness statements, and vehicle location data where available. All reports, lab submissions, and interview transcripts were organized in the case management system. The lead detective conducted case reviews with the prosecutor's office, aligning charging language with evidentiary strengths. The PIO issued a follow-up public statement confirming that one deceased victim had been identified as Jashari Jackson. Identification of the primary suspect began with witness interviews conducted at the scene and in the immediate hours afterward. Detectives canvassed the area, obtained statements from multiple witnesses, and reviewed surveillance and social media footage where available to reconstruct the sequence of events. According to Tulsa police, those witness accounts consistently identified an 18-year-old, later named as Jaida McGrew, as the individual who retrieved a gun and fired shots during the altercation. These witness identifications were the core basis used by investigators to locate and detain the primary suspect. Law enforcement located and arrested Jaida McGrew at the Meadows Apartments in East Tulsa following those interviews and other investigative steps. McGrew was taken into custody, processed, and booked into the Tulsa County Jail. The official booking record and media reporting lists McGrew's charges as first-degree murder and assault with a deadly weapon. The arrest and booking represented the formal transition from investigative status to criminal charging by prosecutors. The arrest timeline as reported, patrol and homicide detectives responded to the scene in the early morning hours, conducted an initial on-scene investigation and evidence collection, and then proceeded with follow-up interviews. Those follow-up steps led detectives to the Meadows Apartments, where they arrested McGrew. The booking and charging information was made public through the Tulsa Police Department and local news outlets after submission of probable cause materials to the county booking system. Following McGrew's arrest and booking, standard criminal procedures were initiated. Those procedures typically include an initial appearance/arraignment before a judge, a reading of charges, setting a bail or detention status, assignment of counsel if requested or required, and scheduling of pretrial dates. Prosecutors must decide whether to pursue additional charges, to file an information or indictment where applicable, and to disclose investigative materials to defense counsel according to discovery rules. The public reporting to date confirms the charging decisions, but does not yet reflect the complete docket or subsequent plea or trial scheduling. Investigators continue to develop evidence after the primary arrest. Routine investigative avenues in this type of case include forensic ballistics on recovered shell casings, forensic examination of any firearm if recovered, analysis of cell phone records and geolocation data, video and photographic evidence retrieval, and corroborating witness statements. Media reports indicate witness testimony was central to identifying McGrew. Police statements describe a person retrieving a gun from a vehicle as the proximate act that produced a gunfire. The publicly available summaries do not specify whether the firearm was recovered at the scene or later, but they do emphasize witness identification and timeline reconstruction as investigative pillars. In early August 2025, law enforcement announced a second arrest related to the same incident. 19-year-old Jeradiah Hernandez was arrested and charged with accessory to first-degree murder. Police allege Hernandez drove the vehicle that transported the primary suspect to and from the scene on the night of the shooting. Investigative reporting and the arrest affidavit referenced by local outlets indicate officers developed information connecting Hernandez to the vehicle and to movements before and after the shooting. This information formed the basis for the accessory charge. The accessory charge, as filed by prosecutors, is based on the legal theory that a person who aids, abets, facilitates, or intentionally assists in commission of felony can be criminally responsible even if they did not fire a weapon or directly cause the victim's death. In practice, accessory charges in homicide cases commonly rely on evidence that a defendant knowingly provided transportation, a weapon, planning assistance, or post-offense aid with knowledge of the principal's criminal intent. The charging document for Hernandez alleges he drove the vehicle used by the shooter and therefore played a facilitating role in the sequence of events that led to the death. The indictment or information and any attached affidavit set out the factual allegations supporting that legal theory. The public summaries reference the driving role specifically. Arrest procedures for Hernandez followed standard law enforcement protocols. Identification of probable cause, execution of arrest warrant or custodial arrest, booking into the county jail, and notification of charges. The timing, reported as early August, indicated investigators continued follow-up work after the initial July arrest, developing corroboration and probable cause for a secondary actor's role. Public reports name Hernandez, list the accessory charge, and cite police statements about his role as the vehicle operator that evening. Both arrests shift primary evidentiary questions to the prosecution's file. What physical evidence links the primary suspect to the gunfire? Whether electronic or video evidence confirms movements and timing? Whether witness statements are consistent and corroborated? And whether the secondary suspect's actions meet the statutory standard for accessory liability? Defense teams will have the opportunity to challenge identification reliability, the sufficiency of probable cause, the admissibility of any statements or forensic results, and any procedural issues in the arrest and booking. The public record as of the latest reports documents, arrests, and charges, but does not yet show final dispositions, plea offers, or trial outcomes. At her initial arraignment, McGrew was formally read the charges filed against her. The court confirmed her identity, outlined the potential penalties associated with first-degree murder under Oklahoma law, and informed her of her rights to counsel and a fair trial. The state emphasized the seriousness of the allegations, citing eyewitness testimony that she retrieved a firearm from a vehicle and fired multiple rounds during a public altercation outside the after-hours club. The arraignment also served as a stage for the first discussions of pretrial release. Defense counsel requested the court consider bail, while prosecutors argued for detention based on the severity of the crime and the threat posed to public safety. In first-degree murder cases, Oklahoma law permits judges to either deny bail outright or set a substantially high bond. Prosecutors highlighted the deliberate act of retrieving a firearm before discharging it in a crowded setting as evidence of intent and dangerousness. They also referenced the fact that a second victim was wounded, further establishing a pattern of reckless disregard for life. The defense requested bond, arguing McGrew's youth and lack of prior serious criminal history. However, given the charge and circumstances, the court leaned toward caution. Reports from the arraignment indicated that bond was either denied or set at an amount beyond typical accessibility, pending further hearings. As the defense prepared its case, several potential strategies emerged. Defense attorneys could attempt to argue that McGrew acted out of fear for her safety. Witness accounts describe multiple individuals engaged in fights outside the club, with tensions between current and former romantic partners. The defense may contend that McGrew retrieved the firearm because she felt threatened during the chaos. Challenges to this claim include the lack of direct evidence that McGrew herself was physically attacked at the time she fired the shots, and the fact that firing into a crowd generally negates traditional self-defense protections. Another potential line of defense is accidental discharge. Eyewitness testimony suggests McGrew may have first fired into the air before shots entered the crowd. The defense could frame this as panic-driven, claiming she did not intend to harm anyone, and that one or more rounds unintentionally struck Jackson. The prosecution, however, is likely to counter that deliberately brandishing and discharging a firearm in a populated environment constitutes intent under Oklahoma law, regardless of the stated purpose of the initial shots. The prosecution's argument centers on intent. By retrieving a firearm from a vehicle, returning to the crowd, and firing, McGrew is alleged to have taken deliberate steps that satisfy the requirements for first-degree murder. Prosecutors will likely stress the conscious decision to arm herself during the altercation, the choice to discharge a weapon in a public setting, the direct consequence of death and injury. For prosecutors, these factors demonstrate premeditation and malicious intent, elements required under the state's definition of first-degree murder. Alongside McGrew, 19-year-old Jeradiah Hernandez faced charges of accessory to first-degree murder. Prosecutors allege Hernandez drove McGrew to and from the crime scene and may have handled the firearm after the shooting. Testimony and surveillance suggesting Hernandez's vehicle was used during the incident. Possible statements from witnesses indicating his awareness of the weapon. His alleged assistance in removing McGrew from the scene, interpreted as an attempt to conceal or aid her escape. Hernandez's defense is expected to argue that he lacked knowledge of McGrew's intent. They may claim he acted as a driver without awareness of her plan to retrieve and use a firearm. They could also contend that his actions after the shooting were motivated by panic rather than deliberate participation in a crime. Following arraignment, both cases entered the pretrial phase. Key proceedings include both sides exchanging evidence such as ballistics reports, witness interviews, and any video recordings.